Okay, the time is now 7:04. This is the Conservation Commission's meeting on Wednesday, November 16th, 2022. And we're going to take a roll call. We have with us Carol Jordan, Marilyn Schreiber, Bob Shabbat, Patty Phillips, and Nora Jones. And as we should note that Peter Anderson submitted his resignation on September 6th, 2022, because he's moving to Maine. So now we have 6 regular members. We have a regular seat that's still open, and Nora's still serving in a capacity as the alternate. Can we seat, Carol, maybe you would know, can we seat Nora for the vacant?
I don't know. I don't see why not. Because
Yeah, I think we could.
yeah, since that there is a vacancy. And I honestly don't know the answer to that, but I don't think it's a major, be major issue unless we got into a really, really controversial issue of some kind and somebody wanted to challenge it, which I doubt very much is going to happen. So,
Okay.
yeah,
Can
I would
hear
say, I
want to
think,
make a motion to seat Nora?
Bob, do you want to make that motion?
Yes,
Sorry.
so moved.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So moved. Okay, so let me just write this down here. Does anybody want to take minutes?
I am up to my eyeballs and
I
anything.
understand. Yeah. Okay. All right. We'll keep it on your radar. If anybody gets an urge to take on some secretarial duties now and again, it's always welcome. First order of business is going to be the approval of minutes from August 17th, 2022. We did not meet in September or October. So those would be the last minutes. Your motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. Thanks, Marilyn. Okay, any discussion about the minutes? Any questions, concerns about the minutes? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of approving the minutes as written from August 17, 2022, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Any abstentions?
I'll abstain.
Ca-
I don't
who's
seem
that?
to- I'll abstain.
Oh,
Carol.
Carol? Okay, all right.
I don't seem to have been there and I don't remember it, so I guess I better abstain.
Oh, okay. No, I don't think you were at that meeting, Carol, actually. I'm looking at the minutes, so. Doesn't appear that we have anybody present to speak tonight. Carol, do you want to give us a treasurer's report under finance?
Yeah, we have the only expenses to date are memberships, renewing memberships in Connecticut Land Conservation Council and Connecticut Association of Inland and Conservation and Inland Wetlands Commissions to a tune of $160. Kathy submitted a bill for cider, for expenses for cider for the workday at Fenton Ruby. Unfortunately, I can't download that, Kathy, so I'll have to didn't want to print, but I have seen it and it looks legit. So if somebody wanted to move that we approve reimbursing Kathy $17.97 for cider for the October workday, that would be in order.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thanks, Patty.
Yep.
All right, any discussion? There were 3 half gallons of cider and I purchased them at the Horse Listeners Farm out in Ashford. So they're probably a little more expensive than if you buy them at Big Y or Price Chopper, but we're helping local farms. So All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? So moved. Thank you, guys. All right, the next item under finance is going to be our request for the capital improvement program, otherwise known as CIP request. And we have to put in our request this year by November 28th. Just to give you a little background especially for those of you who don't have a lot of experience with history, what we typically do. Last year, we did not put in a CIP request because we had put in for a request for the grant and the purchase of the land the previous year. In the past, we were trying to ask for $15,000 a year for CIP kind of looks out for a 5-year period, and we were requesting $15,000 to be put in the open space fund each year. I think the last time they gave us any money was for $30,000. And I'm trying to remember when that was.
That was like 3 years ago or 4 years ago. They chose instead of when I presented that year, and instead we had asked for $10,000 a year, and they decided that they wanted to give us, they'd prefer giving us that in one lump sum, which they did.
Gave us 30.
Right, and that was the seed money to help with the preliminaries for the workup for land purchases.
Right.
Yeah, and then the 21-22 was, we asked for 125,000 for site acquisition and 36,000 for additional expenses for the purchase of the Talmadge Estate property on Mason Road. And, you know, an estimated maximum reimbursement from the state of 62.5, and the state in their wisdom decided to give us more than that. So.
Right. So one of the possibilities, I think, Bob, you had mentioned to me at one point that maybe we could think about requesting money to reimburse the open space fund for expenses that we put forward for this land purchase for the estate, Talmadge Estate property. And Carol and I went through the finances. She was able to get our open space balance. We currently have $57,520 in the open space balance. And that's after some revenues that had come in for fee in lieu and 490 penalties. And also after we deducted the expenses of $42,842 that's been expended from the open space fund toward the purchase of the Talmadge Estate. So we also anticipate there'll probably be some additional legal fees because we're still working with DEEP to finalize the release of the award money. And to be able to do that, we have to redo our title search, update it. We have to include them on the title insurance, and we'll also have to sign an agreement, a conservation easement agreement, which will have to be reviewed by our attorney. So based on what the attorney fees have been so far, Carol and I estimated it may cost an additional $3,000 to $4,000. That's probably on the high end, but if once that was paid out, we'd probably have about $53,000 left in the open space fund after it's all said and done. And we would have.
So our expenditures would be about $50,000 for the Talmadge property.
Yeah,
yeah.
46.8, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, we
Well-
had, there was a total of
42.80.
well, there was a total of 60,000 appropriated from the open space fund, 24 of which was to go toward the actual purchase price of the property, together with 101,000 that came from the town's reserve fund, and leaving an additional 36 to cover expenses. But we still have a little over 17,000 of that has not been spent at this point. So I think we're going to come in with a balance of at least 10,000 and probably more like 12 or, we're 13,000 unexpended, which is good. Because
But
that might just stay with what open space fund.
what I think we should be concentrating on when we go for CIP is the total cost that we had expended on the Talmadge property. And I'm looking, and that figure seems to be like 46.8, say
Yeah.
47,000. That's a number that we can certainly justify for asking for, because of what the costs that we incurred.
Mhm.
Whatever is still, if we can have a ballpark figure of 57,000 left in the open space fund, I think those are the two figures that we should focus on. It's one thing I'm sure they're gonna ask, well, how much money is in the fund? And that's fine, but we also have to bring forward, we're asking for a certain amount of money. Well, why are we asking for that? Well, we want to replenish the money that it costs for any land acquisition, just to be able to initiate a conversation with a landowner.
Yeah, there's something else to take into account, though, is we will be getting the grant from the state was $81,250, and there's a difference of, help me, Kathy, 18,750. That higher than the amount that we suggested might be received. And so Kathy and I talked first about approaching Board of Finance to ask that to clarify, so when the state grant is actually received, we have an agreement up front how that's to be divided between the town's reserve fund, reimbursing the town's reserve fund and reimbursing the open space fund for the overage, so to speak, on the but more the money in excess of what we had suggested might be received.
Right.
As shown in the CIP request last year. So that would give us an additional 18 grand, almost 19 grand to what's there already.
And I did ask Mike McCoo if I could be on Board of Finance's agenda for this Thursday night to discuss that and to let them know what we anticipate getting back from the grant. Sorry, I'm just letting somebody in. Okay. To anticipate what we're going to be getting from the grant and how much CIP had budgeted as returning as revenue. As Carol said, we're getting $18,750 more than we anticipated from the grant, and asking them if they could consider taking that money and putting that back in open space. And then to your point, Bob, perhaps what we request from CIP would be whatever would be needed in addition to that 18,000 to get up to what was spent. So, for example, if we spent on this land purchase, including all the survey and the legal fees, 46,842 out of the open space budget, and they put the 18,750 back into open space, then all we would need to request from CIP would be 28,000, basically, to that would be the additional amount that would make up the 46,842.
Yeah, at the very least, it seems to me that since the state grant is based on the purchase price of the property and not on other costs, that we need to would at least be entitled to a prorated amount. And actually, the 18,000 figure would be approximately that amount, or a bit more. But we are definitely entitled to a prorated share of, in my opinion, of the cost of the $125,000 purchase price on which the state grant was based. And actually, we had told them that we really were concerned that we would not get as much as the 62.5, which was based on 50% of the purchase price. But the state in their wisdom gave us 65% instead, which was very nice. But we definitely are entitled to receive a substantial portion of the money that comes back from the state, because it should go back to the funding sources from whence it came.
So I guess the question is, at this point, we won't know, even when I go to the Board of Finance on Thursday, they may not be able to, they'll be able to consider, but they may not be able to have an answer as to whether or not they would have that extra $18,000 go back into open space. They may have to look at it from some procedural standpoint. And we have to get our CIP request in by the end of this month. So having said that, I mean, CIP is also, once we go forward and have a meeting with them in the winter, usually they have their meetings in the winter and you discuss your request. We can negotiate, so to speak, any change in what we're requesting based on whether or not the Board of Finance has determined whether they would put that 18,000 back into open space.
I think, Kathy, I don't think we should settle for anything less than a prorated share going back to each funding source, which in this case would be slightly less than that difference. But if you think about it, this is reimbursing the grant reimburses the cost of the purchase price of the land. If the purchase price of the land was divided up 101,000 out of the reserve and 24,000 out of the open space fund, then I think the town is obliged to reimburse those funding sources appropriately, at least give a pro rata share back. They can't give it all. In my opinion, they can't give it all because they would be refunding more than 65% of what the town paid toward the price of the property.
Right. Well, again, Carol, I mean, it's going to be up to them. I mean, we can say that we feel,
Well, I think we should get if necessary, I think we should get a legal opinion up front, but it seems to me that I can't justify giving all of the grant money back to the reserve fund when all of the purchase price did not come from that funding source. So I think that's something we might need to get clarification on, and certainly logic would speak to that.
well, I think that they'll be reasonable if we mention that that's, something to consider is, there was additional money that came back and we would like to ask that, that much money gets put back into the open space fund from the award. But then we'll still need to have a CIP request. And so the question is, when we put this request in this month, we may not have an answer back from the Board of Finance regarding that particular issue. So we may want to request more money in our CIP request, and maybe even just keep it at, the request to refund what was paid out overall from the open space fund for this particular purpose, in terms of what Bob's saying, basically to replenish what was taken out.
Right.
That seems like a reasonable CIP request. We could start from there, and when we go forward
But let's not forget that the grant award should be totally separate. The consideration of the distribution of the grant monies should be totally separate from reimbursing for the costs that were funded, the associated costs, which is an entirely different issue than the award from the state for the purchase price of the land.
I think we have to break this down into two issues.
It is.
We can't take and start talking about the reimbursement in the same breath as we're talking about what we're going to ask from CIP.
Yeah.
CIP, when I was there last time and I was able to get the $30,000, an awful lot of particular questions are going to be asked. And I think if we can be as clear as possible, which I tried to be that time, everybody wanted to know what the money was going to be used for. They're looking to see how that money is being used. I think if we can go into CIP, ask for, if it's $30,000, if it's $45,000, we can justify that with just going through, which I did last time, all the different things that we need to have funding when we approach and start working with a landowner for a possible acquisition.
Right.
And that's the only thing that we want to talk about when we're at CIP. We don't want to start talking about, oh, this portion and that portion. That needs to be taken care of and on another plane with the Board of Finance. That's where that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, and that's what I think that we're talking about. However, I think that we've had a lot of revenue, unanticipated revenue, in that we're getting money from several sources. We've gotten and there is more money coming in, will be coming in from other subdivisions, because where's my income report? The income, we got a fee from the builder for fee in lieu of open space of well, $10,000 rounded up. It's $9,999, and then we also received over $24,400 in penalties, which I presume are not 490 penalties. And those, so we got a big chunk of revenue that came in this year. And so our balance is higher than one might have expected it to be. So I guess one thing that I think we might expect might happen is that there will be some, that they're going to look at what the current balance is in the fund. I'm just saying, being realistic, that might have some effect on how they receive our requests. They're also changing the format, and I haven't had a chance to look at it, but it's probably going to be a royal pain in the neck, because this is always due in the midst of the holiday season. And at least we've gotten a little bit more notice this year than we have some years. Some years they've given us notice after we've already had our November meeting, and they want something, by the end of November or early December. I just think, being realistic, they will look at what the balance is, and the amount of income we've received this year, and that I'm sure will naturally might factor into what kind of, how they react to a proposal. I don't know, Kathy, do you recall? I don't know that we've ever in the past asked for to get back monies advanced by the Open Space Fund in the previous grant applications. Do you
Not that I recall, no, that we haven't requested that when the town was reimbursed by the state, no.
And the understanding of the townspeople were that money would come from open space, and whether I'm not sure that it makes sense to put forward a request based on basically overriding a decision of the townspeople on how what that funding should be used for. So I'm a little bit leery of tying it to specific requests specifically to what the associated expenses were. That's the maximum was going to be 36,000. We're spending less of it than that, but I'm a little concerned about tying our request specifically to reimbursing for those costs, since the townspeople authorized the expenditure to come from the Open Space Fund. So replenishing the Open Space Fund, I think, should be kept separate from tying it to reimbursing that, because essentially that would be overriding a decision of the townspeople in town meeting. It's a
Does
whole,
anybody else have any other thoughts on this as we're talking? I know that some of you haven't been around for many of these cycles, these CIP cycles.
What was the total amount of the grant we got? 82,000?
81,
81,250.
Okay, thank you.
And we had the expectation when CIP put their budget together in terms of revenue coming back basically as in form of a grant was
62.5.
5.
Yeah, it was 62.5, and which was 50% of the purchase price of 125,000. And we at that time we didn't have any reason to expect that we would even get that much, and told them as much. But I'm not sure that it makes sense, because we would be asking them essentially to override a decision that was made by the town as a whole, not just by the Board of Finance or the CIP or whoever. I think talking in terms of replenishing because we spent that, and we as volunteers were successful in achieving a grant, and a lot of and for that reason, I think we would deserve some consideration for the work that was put in by this commission of volunteers in order to achieve that end. But I don't think we should be tying it to a specific amount of money expended that was authorized by the town.
So what would you suggest we ask for in a CIP request, Carol, in terms of the amount?
I don't know. And, I don't know what they're going to ask. I don't think we should be, it's.
Lost your audio.
Hmm?
No, she's still on.
Oh, I think I'm on. I don't
Yeah,
know.
you
Maybe I
are.
lost audio.
Yeah. But anyway, I think, I don't
Can
think.
someone else say something to see if I can hear you?
Hey, can you hear me?
I lost audio, so let me see what I can do about my audio.
Hello.
I think there's some things that are sort of a slippery slope if you start talking about reimbursing for what we paid out when the people said you can spend this much from that. Replenishing the fund is a whole different story, and then we have to talk about what amount we want. Do we want to have ask for the same amount per year over the next 5 years of the 5 years of the upcoming plan? And that's I think a different issue.
So what's your suggestion, Carol, for replenishing the?
It's not up to me.
No,
I
no,
will
but-
pass, I will pass
I would-
along whatever your commission decides. I don't have any particular figure in mind.
Okay.
I would go along with the idea of going before CIP and saying that we'd like to replenish. I have no problem with that. And I think that if you're going to ask for $10,000 a year, I think that's lowballing the situation.
Yeah.
Considering that we didn't ask for any money last year, and we should have. When I had asked for $30,000 over a 3-year period, it didn't seem like they hesitated too much to just say, well, at that rate, why don't we just give you the 30,000 in one lump sum?
Great. But at the time, Bob, I think that the balance in the open space fund was closer to $30,000. We didn't have a lot of money in there. I'm just saying, at the time,
Yeah.
we will have $53,000.
How much
Left.
land is that going to buy you?
No, I am in agreement with you. I guess the question is how they view the open space fund. Is it a fund that just help us kind of get the ball rolling, to do the appraisals, to do the survey, to do the purchase and sales? And then they, traditionally they've said, if you find a piece of land, come to us, we'll find the money. And that's what they actually have done in the past. I mean, the town has done that. We haven't had a lot of money in our open space fund that's actually gone toward the land purchase per se. It's usually been used for those ancillary costs. I think we should ask for, $10,000-$15,000 to be put in every year. But as you said, I think they're also going to look at the balance that is in there and say, well, how much money do we just want to leave sitting in there, not doing anything until another piece of property comes up for sale? And that's been the attitude in the past. I'm not saying it's the current attitude, but we can ask for whatever and they can trim that down. They can give us nothing. But I think having a rationale for what we're asking is important. So it looks like it was a rational thought of why we're asking for the amount we're asking.
Right. And the other thing to consider too is how desirable is it for the town to acquire additional open space, given that we have volunteer resources that are stretched pretty thin, the primary maintainers of those properties and the stewards of those properties. One of the things we've talked about is using the money not necessarily to buy, and this is also a selling point to the town as well, but to assist people who want to acquire property or to put their land in an easement and that sort of thing. But you see that very often that funds will be the town will put in funding to assist either a land trust or an individual in acquiring open space or putting their money, their property into an easement. So it's not just purchase that we're looking at, but all other potential sources of assisting in the preservation of open space property, one way or another.
Right. So the question still is, how much should we be asking in our CIP request? And as I said, it's a span of 5 years. You can ask for a certain amount for 1 year or for 5 of those years. What seems to be a reasonable amount that we can justify?
Could I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Marilyn.
Is there still money left? Hopefully I get the ABCs right. And the ARPA fund? Has the ARPA fund been exhausted?
Well, the ARPA fund probably couldn't be used for any open space purchases. I don't know how much is left. But when we inquired about that last year, we were basically told that it could not be used for land purchase.
Well, I'm not going to suggest a particular number, but I think we should shoot high and let them shoot us down instead of us going low and finding out we could have had more. So go for a number that is sort of high, but not outrageous, and go fishing with it and see how big of a trout we get.
Okay, so does anybody want to make a motion that says how much per year we should ask for? And I'll try and pull together some language to support that.
Well, it seems like with the whole warehouse planning and zoning meetings that were had, that the townspeople came out and said they want to keep
Right.
open space and acquire it. So if we kind of tag it on to that idea, since it was so relevant and so recent that so many people came out,
Right.
it would seem like now's the time to request the big money.
I would feel very comfortable going before CIP and asking for 30,000 a year. I wouldn't hesitate at all. And if you want me to be the scapegoat, I'd be more than happy to do that.
Was that a motion?
Do you want to make a motion and we'll see how that rolls, Bob?
I'll make a motion that the Conservation Commission ask in our presentation this year for the 5-year CIP plan, that we ask for $30,000 be set aside into the open space fund
Each year,
for each year.
Chair?
To the
Okay.
next 5 years.
Is there,
Agreed.
is there a
Second.
second on that?
I
That
second
was
it.
Patty, okay,
Yep.
all right. And any more discussion on this? All right, hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, moved, thank you. All right, thanks, Bob. That was quick and easy, so to speak. And so when I go before Board of Finance on Thursday, we'll talk just about the fact that we got the additional money that we weren't expecting, and that we feel that some type of pro rata amount should go back into the open fund, given that we received additional money that we weren't expecting. Is that how the commission?
That's correct,
Actually,
yes.
actually, I think, Kathy, that I think we need to resolve what their legal, the legal, I think there's a legal obligation to return the funds at the minimum, to return the funds to the funding source. And, if we'd gotten a smaller grant, that would have been different. But I think we need to look into that. And also, we definitely should be entitled to at least that much, because since it's all based on the purchase price, and that was divided between two funding sources, there should be at least, in my opinion, a pro rata share. And that's an argument that should be brought forth as well. And not just, well, we think the difference. I think it's a great idea to say, okay, we got more, we brought in more money, let us keep it, is a great argument, but that also will cover the appropriate distribution of the funds. Or not. I mean, it depends on how you look at it. But I think there really isn't that there's some that question is that we should certainly bring that forward, and maybe we could get the selectmen to look into how the grant monies are to be divided, since they came from two different sources.
Okay. Well, remember, I mean,
But
when
at least we should raise the
saying-
subject.
we have to
yeah.
be careful when we use the word entitled, because it's not our fund. It's not the Conservation Commission's fund.
No, it's the open space. But I'm saying the funding sources could probably be compensated, I believe, on a pro rata basis, not since the funding did not all come from if all the money went to the reserve fund, that, in my opinion, would be inappropriate, because about 20% of the funding of the purchase price came from the open space fund, and
Right.
that's, to me, a more appropriate way of dealing it would be pro rata. But that's something to an argument that I think needs to be brought forward.
Mhm. Okay, that sounds good. I can certainly bring that forward on Thursday if everybody else is in agreement with that. Just in general, we won't take a vote, but anybody opposed to us
Not at all.
using that rationale? Okay, thank you, Carol.
Okay.
Thanks for that idea. Moving forward, old business, Talmadge Estate property. Deep still has our survey in hand, and they're still reviewing it. I was told that their surveyor, the state surveyor, was out ill for quite a while, and he's pretty backed up. So they still have to approve of the survey, the A2 survey that was done, before we can move forward with a few other tasks that are required before they will release the funds. After that, we'll have to update the title search, add them to the title insurance, and also sign the conservation easement. We'll also need a site. They'll have to come out for a site walk to be sure that we've removed the old truck body and the tires that were noted in the appraisal, and that has been done. Chris and I went out and we collected all the tires and put them over by the old truck body, and then Public Works was kind enough to come out and pick everything up. So that's off the property now.
Okay, so the tires and the car body and all of that, the whole.
Yep, and the
Okay, great.
fencing, there was some old fencing around an old garden area. So that's all gone now. The next thing we'll need to do on the new Talmadge Estate property would be boundary marking. So to take some of our markers, we have lots of markers, and put them along the boundaries. We'll have to lay out the new trail that we discussed, and also we'll have to put up a new sign that will indicate that DEEP was, part of the funding source. So those are three things we'll need to do as well. We don't need to put, the signage does not have to be up by the time DEEP comes out for their inspection. But I think if we could try to get that all done before the end of spring and then have some type of dedication on the property, that would be nice. We could invite the family, the landowners, previous landowners, and the public out to kind of celebrate the new property. So one of the things I'd like to ask, Chris and I are very willing to work on doing the boundary marking, and maybe we can get some folks involved in doing some of the trail layout. Chris said that he'd be willing to make put in the posts and put the sign up when we eventually get the sign, but we'll at least need to get posts and plywood up before we have the signs made. And Chris said he's willing to do that, and also to pick up materials. So he kind of put a budget together, because we're going to need some paint to do, on the boundaries. We should be putting red paint as well as the markers, and also we'll need trail paint. Put together a possible expenditure of up to $200 that includes also the posts and the plywood. So I was going to ask if the commission would consider authorizing an expenditure of up to $200 for the purchase of paint, hardware, and posts required for boundary marking, trailblazing, and signage. I'm making a motion on that.
Yeah, Kathy, one thing that I wonder, I think we need to make some decisions on I think we might want to consider what size sign we want. It's going to have different language because it's to the part of the purchase.
Carol, I'm sorry, I'm not hearing you, and it might be my audio again. Are other people hearing Carol? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, because the side, part of the, can you hear me, Kathy? No?
Not sure why I keep having trouble with my audio.
But the,
Okay, can you hold that thought for a minute,
Sure.
Carol? I'm going to call in. Let me see if I can call into the meeting so I can hear you with my phone. It's going to take me a minute to get the. Let's see. Join the meeting. Sorry, guys. I don't know why my audio went out.
okay, can you hear me now?
See if I can get on here. Chris, do you have some ideas of why the audio would have gone out on the laptop? I unplugged because it had gone out. You can try again. You can plug it in and see if it works now. Let's see. Oh, what about disconnect? Okay, I think that's working now. Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you
Yes.
hear
Yeah,
us?
but can you
Yes.
hear us?
Can you
Yeah,
hear us? Sorry about that. I had a Bluetooth speaker on and it just started to go kind of wonky, so.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, there are a couple of things. I have no problem with spending the money on the paints and the boundary marking and all of that. I think we need to give some thought to the signage, because if you look at the park signage, we have much smaller signs for the Knowlton property than we did for the original Talmadge property. And the purchase and sales agreement that we had with the family, the Talmadge family, was that they wanted to have both their father and their mother's name on the properties. And we have to, for purpose of the grant, we have to keep the two parcels separate, which means we have to have two signs. One is a deep sign and the other one is a DEP sign and the other one is a DEEP sign. But we will also have to do new signage for the old parcel so that it will include Eleanor's name as well as Daniel's name as the title of the property. So I think we need to do some planning in terms of what size signage we want, and before we actually work on constructing that. With that reservation, I support proceeding with that sometime in this fiscal year. It would be nice to do.
Yeah, I think what Chris was trying to do is get the posts in before the ground freezes. And I know we can do it in the spring, but things get very busy, in the spring, and just trying to get ahead of the game. That was part of the rationale. I mean, I think the overall sign for the Talmadge and the Knowlton is about the size, the piece of plywood is about the same size. I mean, the lettering might have to be a little smaller if you include Eleanor's name on the signage, but I mean, we certainly can wait. But I would also like to see if I can get one of you guys to get involved with working with the people that would make the signs and coming up with at least a mock-up.
Yeah.
That would be helpful.
Yeah, and there are some other sign companies. The company that called Fast Signs that did the signage for the pollinator garden, that worked with the Girl Scouts on the pollinator garden, they were very good to work with and very responsive. And so might be something where we might want to look into getting bids from several different vendors as well.
Right.
I know we've got one that's local, but just throw that out there as a consideration.
Right. So then we have two issues. So I'm asking, at least we need to buy some paint and some hardware to put up we need some nails, because we don't have nails for the signage.
Yep.
Go on. So we do need some expenditure for those items if we're not going to buy the posts and the plywood at this point.
Well, I think buy the posts. At least
yeah,
get the
go ahead and buy-
posts in.
Yeah, get the posts in. Yeah, we know where we want to put it, but the part of the problem is we need to know how big a piece of plywood. But I think I don't mean to be nitpicky, and I have no problem with appropriating money now to be used for this purpose. But I'm just saying we need to give some thought to the design of the signs and before we actually space the posts. I would think, just saying. But I'm not opposed to appropriating the money at this point.
Okay, so we can appropriate the money and we have this year to spend it. So we're not going to necessarily spend it all. We can appropriate the money and then buy what we need right now out of that appropriation and buy the rest later. Is that correct, Carol?
Yeah, I would say, why don't we just make an appropriation to spend $200 on hardware, lumber, and paint? and then leave it open-ended. And then, you know, we don't have to be too specific about exactly what it's used for, to be used for.
Okay,
Now,
Has,
can I
has,
ask, can I
has,
ask a question?
yeah, Nora, go ahead.
So would it be easier to get the posts in now because of, um, we have somebody that's willing to do it, and is it gonna be muddy in the spring? I don't know. You know more about the work on
Well,
the parcels. Would it be to our advantage to put them in now? Or
I don't,
for you
I
to
don't
put
know.
them in now?
If, again, we're trying to get ahead of the game because we get
Mhm.
busy in the spring and we may be going away to Vermont, you know, for a good part of the summer. So it's easier to put them in before the ground freezes, that's for
Right,
sure.
right.
I don't know that it'll be muddy where they're going to be located. And as far as spacing them, I don't think that you have to be, you know, if you have a general idea that the plywood's going to be at least as big as what we have now, it
Mhm.
probably could be a little bigger, but you could still use the same posts and at
Mhm.
probably at the same spacing.
I agree.
yeah,
I haven't, yeah, I think it makes sense to do at least, you know, as we're looking at this, to look at the existing signage. And I believe that the Talmadge, my recollection is that the Talmadge size certainly looks a lot more imposing than the size that were put in for Knowlton. I may be wrong about that, you know, might be an optical illusion, but at least we could look at what the actual sizes of the existing signs are, and the amount of verbiage that's got to go on the new sign, and whether we want to deal at the same time with the
None.
existing, replacing the existing sign for the Talmadge, first Talmadge parcel.
Okay,
But that's
thanks.
another whole, you know, we can vote on the actual cost of the signage later.
Yeah, I mean, we're not gonna be, this isn't to appropriate the actual making of the sign itself. This is just plywood and.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So do I hear a motion? Oh, well, that was my motion, basically, that I move that the CC authorize the expenditure of up to $200 for hardware, lumber, and paint. Is that all we need to say?
I'll
do you,
second.
okay,
Okay. Any more discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? So moved. Thank you, guys. All right, moving on. Fenton Ruby Park and Drobny Sanctuary. We held the park workday on 10/22/2022. And we had 13 volunteers come out. Bob and myself and Chris were there as well. So we're 16 of us working out near the Taylor Foundation, and did a great job of really clearing out a lot of the invasive plants there and tree and that had come down and so on. So it looks really, really good out there. And Carol was gracious enough to make her delicious applesauce cookies, which were really enjoyed by everyone. So thanks, Carol. The Girl Scouts, I don't know if people have been out at the park recently, but they've installed 4 bird houses, which was part of what they had discussed when they talked about the pollinator gardens. They put them around Fenton Ruby Park, close to the parking areas, you know, where the benches and the pollinator garden are. So they've got them kind of spread out there. I don't know if anybody else has seen them yet.
No.
So I have to say, and I'd like all of your opinion when you're out there. I was a little disappointed when I had talked to Connie. We talked about 2 things. One was that trying to keep everything look as natural as possible. And if they, first we talked about whether or not they would paint the birdhouses or not. And I said, well, if you paint them, please paint them, you know, in a very muted brown color or gray or something. And what's out there right now is something very, very bright, like bright blues with light blue tops. And also the size of the birdhouses don't appear to be big enough to me. The hole located more toward the bottom of the houses, so I'm not sure even if birds would use them. So when you have a chance, go out and take a look. I don't want to discourage the Girl Scouts. They were kind enough to do a lot of, things for the park. But if we're not happy with the way things came out, we might have to ask them to do a redo on the birdhouses.
And to give us at least a preview of what their plans are, and so we can review things before they're actually put in place
Yeah.
in the future.
They're decorative.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that's what I think we want. More important is, will the birds use them, and do they blend into the environment? They're kids, they like bright colors, like I say, but
I'll be home.
but I do
I'll be home
think
for
we-
Thanksgiving, so I'll check them out.
Okay.
It
I'll
can
be in the area.
It
How
can
do
be
you
used as,
say no to these girls, though?
I know.
you can use it as a teaching moment. You can say you did a really nice job, but we researched it and we discovered that the birds won't feel comfortable moving in with those bright colors. So if you want to help the environment, we need to change the color of the birdhouses because the birds don't want to come and live there.
Did they
then-
did they make the boxes?
My
Did they-
understanding is that was part of what they were going to do, was to, cut them out and make them. Yeah.
Just use it as a teaching moment instead of a
Yeah,
negative 10. They probably would, I mean, they're young girls. They might never have thought that birds would care about the color, but obviously it probably matters, and they would just never cross their minds.
Or the
Mm.
size, I think.
Are they,
Or
are
the
they
size, yeah.
Kathy, were they supposed to be bluebird houses, or any particular birds? Do you know?
Chickadee, bluebirds, tree
Okay.
swallow, and all of that pattern is pretty much the same for all those birds. I mean, if they looked at the boxes we have out there now, they're much deeper, the holes more at the top. And, they were pretty much unfinished. There's, I think,
Yeah,
stain on them, but that's about it.
yeah. Yeah, and that's more typical of what you see.
Yeah. So, okay, well, give me some feedback. And I can talk to the girls after.
You're very diplomatic, Kathy, so I'm sure you get.
Maybe those
Oh.
birdhouses are winter bluebird houses, because in the winter, we always turn our bluebird house fronts over so that the hole is on the bottom. So they can go in and they can roost on the dowels that are inside, so that the heat accumulates inside the box.
Yeah.
So, and in the wintertime, there's been as many as 25 bluebirds found in one bluebird box.
Wow.
Wow.
Keep it warm.
You have to put the dowels inside for them to do that, Bob?
Yes, that's why when you buy a bluebird house, it usually has 2 or 3 dowels inside on the back of the back of the house.
That's
Oh,
cool.
neat.
Interesting.
No. Okay, and moving forward, just so you know, the bench is now located out on Julius Trail. Chris and I got that out there. The next item I wanted to talk about was the boundary encroachment issue that we had discussed last time. One of the owners that abuts the park, who lives on Moose Meadow Road. Bob and I had gone out there to talk to him because he was concerned about the hedgerow that was growing behind his house that borders the property. And that it was impeding his view. And at the time, Bob and I also found that he had been cutting trees. So I brought that information back to the Board of Selectmen, and finally worked out something with Erica and Mike
Okay.
D'Amato from the zoning office, that a letter was sent out to the property owner on October 20th, basically letting him know that, we were aware of the unauthorized cutting of trees on Fenton Ruby Park, and that, you know, if any more of that was to occur, that, you know, there certainly was going to be some reaction from the town, that at this point that was, you know, inappropriate. And so the landowner contacted the first selectman's office and came in for a meeting on November 7th. I was invited to that meeting, as was Mike D'Amato from zoning. And the landowner still was very frustrated because there are shrubs growing along the boundary. And he was also saying now it's not just a view shed issue for him, but that he was concerned that it was a fire hazard because he has a fire pit in the back of his house. And he was concerned that any kind of sparks or so on might float over onto the shrubs. So basically the discussion we had was that it was, you know, we did not believe it was a fire hazard. It's all part of the landscape of Fenton Ruby Park. The hay fields are there. They're used as grasslands before they're cut by grassland birds, and that the shrubbery that's around the boundaries is also part of habitat for animals and for the birds, and that the town was not going to take steps to remove it. So he wasn't real happy about that. He left the meeting unsatisfied, but that's basically where that's at.
Maybe he should have thought before about where he was positioning his fire pit.
I guess he said that the fire pit was put in place before he bought the house. So it's
I don't,
something,
okay.
yeah.
I think he just has a ring of rocks. I don't think I don't think it's like a, you know, a stone masonry fire pit.
I don't really remember, to be honest
Right.
with you. It's set back pretty far. If you look, even if you use satellite imagery and you look in the backyard of his house, you can see it's, there's actually shrubs in his yard that are right next to where the fire pit is. And then there's maybe 45 feet before the boundary line. So, you know, he's just not happy about having the shrubs there. I mean, I am concerned that we do have invasive plants in those hedgerows that are all around the fields. It's not just in that area. You know, optimally would be great if we could go in there and cut everything down, but it would be a humongous task to cut all of the hedgerows, all of the invasive plants that are in those hedgerows. And the best we've been able to do is just keep mowing the fields once a year to keep those invasive plants from spreading into the fields.
And are they spreading more because he cut all the trees down? He cut all the trees around the property down too. Would that impact the invasives?
Sure, I mean,
Right?
Yeah.
you know, the trees that we saw that were cut, the only ones that we can say that we know that he cut because he admitted to them were over down in the corner of the field, not directly behind his house. But if you look at satellite imagery, the latest ones that I can find are like from 2019, and there were trees along that whole boundary, and there's none now. So he bought the property in 2021. So I can't say that he cut those trees, but certainly it's let in a lot more light along those areas, and the shrubs there are taking off. They're tall. You know, what Bob can tell you, we both went out there. So, okay, moving forward, Knowlton Preserve Talmadge Track. It came to my attention from the stewards, Bill and Kathleen Bland, who steward the Talmadge Spur Trail, that they found that the bridge that we had replaced using the ladder, I don't know if you guys remember, we had used the ladder that Marilyn and Dave had donated and placed the bridge up higher over the water course. And they feel that that's pretty slippery. And they were concerned because it's up higher, and if somebody was to slip and fall, they would fall into the water or into that stream bed. It's not deep or anything, but it, could certainly injure somebody because it is up higher. So they suggested that maybe we get some chicken wire or hardware cloth to put on the top of the bridge to make it a little less likely that somebody would have a slip on it. And Bob did donate some hardware cloth, and we got that over to Bill and Kathy Bland. So they'll be working on putting that on the bridge in the near future. Parking lot signage, we had talked about putting a new sign on Knowlton property side in the parking area, and that we would, one of the scouts had talked about possibly doing it as an Eagle Scout project. But I've queried him with emails several times and he's not getting back to me. So I don't know if he decided not to do it. But that's another thing that's kind of on the table. If we want to, we can look at maybe doing something in that parking lot area at some point next spring or, summer. Conwood Forest Management Plan. As you know, we need a new update for the Knowlton Preserve, the Talmadge Track, and then we were also adding in the new Talmadge Estate property, and Conwood was hired to do that. The contract and the deposit finally were sent out. They were waiting for the ARPA funds for the second tranche to come in, and they finally came in. So that contract and deposit was sent out. So I'm expecting Conwood to start doing their field work soon.
Great.
Okay. Anybody have anything else to add under property management? Any questions or things? I know that Patty, you're out at the park a lot. Any concerns or? No. You're muted.
Yep. Nope. I was there yesterday. So no, everything looks fine.
Good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Town development. The only update I have is that planning and zoning did deny the application for PZ-22-10, which was the application for the zone change that would have allowed for the warehouse development on the property located on River Road. And right now, planning and zoning is considering a moratorium on the strategic development zone regulations. They'll be possibly voting on a moratorium. I think it's next meeting, Bob.
That'll probably be on the 6th, I believe.
Oh, okay, in December.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're looking at a possible moratorium so that they have more time to review and possibly revise the regulations.
Oh, basically reconstruct the SDZ regulation.
Right, right. And also possibly working with the Economic Development Commission, right?
Yes. And that's
kind
where the SDZ zone thing originated. So it's a no-brainer to work with them in massaging that to better protect the town.
Right. And do you have anybody else have any other news from other commissions or boards that would be something? Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, also planning and zoning, we approved a building on the corner of Ruby Road and on exit 71, right next to TA. That's going to be a 2,500 square foot building. Tenant to be determined, and the building's going to take up a small footprint of that, but there's going to be, the rest of their property is going to be developed as a solar array. And they will have several quick charge stations for electric vehicles on site.
So that'll be the first solar arrays in town, really.
Right, yeah, except for private ones. Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
Great.
I was asked by Joshua's Trust as along with several other people who are on a subcommittee to answer a set of questions that was given to each one of us for each what town we're in, to give them information on how each town is dealing with open space, and it was a set of questions that they asked us to go into the POCD and find the answers for. So I went to the POCD with my list of questions and reported back to them. And they're using this as a way to try to determine areas where they should be interested in trying to do more land protection, and based on what the POCDs in each town have listed in the POCD. And I was quite impressed with the percentage of land that we have. And I'm not comparing it to the other towns, but it was really encouraging to see when you go through the POCD looking for these facts, how well we're doing a pretty good job when you consider the size of our town. It's not a large town. So that was a group of, it was Mansfield, Eastford. It's a big area that they're scheduling to reach out into. So that our information from Wellington was given to the Joshua's Trust via me going through the POCD and pulling out the features that they wish to have reported back to them.
So does
Yeah.
that mean that Joshua's is looking to invest in more open space or help with open space acquisition?
They're trying to acquire land in not a little bit over here and a little bit over there and a little over here. They're trying to create a zone where they want to specialize in drilling down to see if they can make it a bigger zone than just a hodgepodge like on a quilt.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And they
Sure.
just hired a new employee who that is his main objective, is he's been giving that as his task, to try to figure out how to protect land in a with other land trusts together to create a map that is more contiguous with pieces of property meeting up with each other.
Well, I think that the Conservation Commission has done a fairly good job of making sure that we have blobs of
Right,
protected land as opposed to little individual specks
Yeah.
here and there.
yeah, yeah.
I think one, just a personal comment is, I think it would help if there were more diversity in terms of towns represented on the board of Joshua's Trust, because it seems as if there's a large preponderance of Mansfield representation. And I think that having more representatives from other towns might help with a more regionalized approach. Just a
And I think
comment.
that's what Peter had brought to the table for them, representing Wellington.
That they-
Marilyn, are you
Marilyn's
considered
on.
representative from Wellington? What is your role at JT?
She's on the board.
I'm on the board.
Yeah.
I'm on this subcommittee. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of it. And I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the subcommittee, but each person is supposed to, try to keep up on what's going on in the town. So that in terms of conservation. So it was a no-brainer that I sign up for it because it's not difficult for me to do that. It's very difficult now to get people to want to join as a volunteer. It's a problem that every organization is having.
Yep.
And you just have to just not let that get in the way, and you just hope that the people who are on the subcommittees can do whatever they are capable of doing when they can do it. And you can't get bound up in the fact that there's not as many volunteers as you'd like. It's just the way of the world right now. It's
Yeah.
just the way it is. It's a different generation of people than it used to be. That volunteerism isn't quite what it used to be because more people, families, both members of the family have to work, and there's just not a lot of spare time lying around for people with families.
Right. Well, just keeping in mind as you, all of us, as we come into contact with other people who may seem to have some type of interest, always encourage people to maybe tune into our meetings or consider volunteering, even as an alternate, coming to the commission and just kind of seeing what we do and or volunteering to be friends of Fenton Ruby Park, be on our list to just know about when we have work days and such. So.
Yeah, I
Right.
think that's great. You had such a good turnout for the workday at FRP.
Yeah, we did. As a matter of fact, we have a person who was one of the volunteers today at the workday. Mark Fisher Keller's on the call right now too. And thank you, Mark, for coming out to help us at the last workday.
Welcome.
Moving on, collaborative organization news and communication. I don't have any specific communication from any of the organizations. The Kakiwik conference was held in October. I don't think any of the commissioners here did attend that I know of. Okay, well, maybe next year we can. I know a lot of us are still, I still have a little bit of a reservation about going to large group conferences, and this was not a hybrid conference. So if it had been, I would have attended. Regional pollinator pathway initiatives. The Girl Scouts, as part of their Silver Award project, they wrote up about 2 pages of information about the importance of pollinators and how native plants support them. They had some pictures they put together of the pollinator gardens the 3 pollinator gardens that they put together in town, 2 at the school, 1 at Fenton Ruby. And they put that together and sent it to me, and I asked Tish to put it on our website. So now on the CC website, there's a menu item on the left-hand side called Pollinator Gardens and Pathways. And people can click on that link to get that information. And the Girl Scouts also have additional links embedded in their information. So you can go to the Pollinator Pathway to get, more information. So that was nice that they did that. I think I sent you all the link in an email.
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
You've had to look at it. And they, I encourage them if they have any additional updates or new information that they want to put on that sub web page on our website, that we're happy to do that. Open space opportunities. Anybody have anything come up? Any new ideas about some potential open space opportunities?
Well, we did have a kind of a short discussion last night at planning and zoning. FedEx is in need of a larger parking area. And they'd like to put a parking lot in the CI zone next to where the town parks the school buses for additional parking for trailers and quote unquote employee vehicles. It would probably be used during their overage times from the fall, probably about a 4-month period through the Christmas period into January, February. And there is concerns about trucks using a increased number of trucks using the Ruby Road between the FedEx entrance to that area where the school buses are parked. One of the options that might be available to them is to possibly use the 50 or 60 acres that are set aside with an easement on the back side of the FedEx building. And several years ago, it was proposed, and they didn't follow through to the state level, but there was another piece of property made available to FedEx that could be donated to the town as open space if they were allowed to use that acreage that's now set aside on the property that they own. And the people that are working on behalf of FedEx to develop this new parking area, we had a discussion last night, and they're going to start that conversation with FedEx again about possibly going to the state and doing a land swap. So that might be an opportunity that comes up. The
Bob,
land use people aren't quite sure how that is written, if it's in a sense be able to undo that. But what they're feeling is that because all that area around FedEx is designated as DI, that's designated industrial, it basically leaves that 60-acre parcel in the middle of a development area. So it might be a good idea if we could work a land swap with for another parcel of land, and let that go, become part of the industrial area that is going to surround it.
And Bob,
It's very, very preliminary at this point.
Bob, are we talking the big parcel that's on the north side of the FedEx property? Because
On
I
the
did
east
look at
side.
the,
On the
Okay,
east
yeah,
side
east
that they
side.
already own.
yeah, but there's a large easement that was granted to the town. However, if you should take a look at the that is included on our list of open space, right? With these
Yes, it
open
is.
space easements, and it's a sizable portion. But I did look into that a while back, and my recollection is that the Conservation Commission has no authority over this. It's state
No,
of
the
Connecticut.
town does. The town and the state hold the easement.
But if you look at the easement document, the Army Corps of Engineers is involved with this,
Yes.
the state DEP,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure if it's inland wetlands, but it's not Conservation Commission.
No.
But there are three parties involved. So
Yes.
it's not going to be a simple thing, I think, to
No,
undo
it's not.
that, because particularly because of Army Corps stuff. And
Yep.
the purpose intent was to preserve an area of mature forest, I believe. So that document, that's in our files, the agreement. So it would be, I think, a difficult thing to undo, but not something in which we would have any voice as a Conservation Commission, other than a recommendation.
Right. And
Right.
our recommendation, we can make our recommendations to the town insofar as their input to that particular situation. And Mike D'Amato is going to look into that, as well as their FedEx's attorney.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just looking to, because that's a very large piece, and I think it is.
The town would get a larger piece of property in lieu of that parcel,
Yep.
if it could be given up.
So it's a possibility they're looking into, rather than having to develop another parcel, having more impervious surface, in another part of town. It might,
Right.
again, it might be something if there's a possibility where there could be a swap to have land that's undeveloped come, for the town to have as open space. rather than just an easement.
Mhm.
It's definitely something we could look at once they decide which direction they might move in. And look at it and see if it would be something we would be in support of.
Yeah, it's a large, it's 58.57 acres. Is the size of that easement. So it's a substantial piece of
Right.
property. But I think given all the different parties involved, it might be, especially since it involves the federal government as well. Who knows what it would take to work out a change of this thing. Anyway.
Okay. Anything else? Anybody aware of any other issues? I know we talked about, we still don't have a firm answer. The parcel that's on Burma Road. So if you go up past the end of Burma Road where the rocks are and you keep going up on Burma Road where it's not maintained anymore, there's a parcel up there. As you turn the corner, it's a 7-acre parcel that's owned by a woman who had approached the town. Her husband had passed away and she was interested in perhaps trying to sell it to the town. And at the time, I think Peter had let her know we were in the middle of dealing with the Talmadge Estate property and that we really didn't have the funding to even, kind of consider it at the time. And then she had come back to the town just asking again if we were interested, and she would like to put the property on the market, but her concern is that the town road is not maintained. And so there isn't really a way for her to show the property, for a realtor to show the property. And so we had asked the Board of Selectmen to look into this to see what if the town has some type of responsibility for keeping that part of the road open so that a landowner could access it. I did have a meeting with Erica and Mike D'Amato, and because it's been such a long time since the town has maintained that road, and first of all, it would not be something the town would want to start maintaining because it would be very cost prohibitive to get into any kind of shape. So they're looking at options from a legal perspective too, as whether or not, that's just become a right of way for that person now. There is a way to come down from Lustig and hit the other end of Burma Road, but the part of Lustig that comes through that way is in Ashford, and Ashford's not maintaining that part of the road either. And there's several trees, large trees that are down on Lustig. So again, that landowner doesn't have any way to bring a vehicle in and down to the property. So I know that we talked about whether or not this might be a parcel that we wanted to consider adding on to Fenton Ruby Park. It does have a pond on it. It also has a large wetland area that is to the north of the pond. And it does have a building on the property. It's an older, very small, kind of like
Like a camp, a real,
It's got a cabin with a
property in
foundation.
general has not been kept up at all.
No.
It's very overgrown overall. So we had talked about whether or not this would be something we want to consider adding onto the park. One of the reasons I think too, we were thinking is if somebody was able to sell that property and at least maintain some kind of road access to it, that would open up the town's property, Fenton Ruby Park, to more invasion and incursion by ATVs and things like that. So I don't know if people have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think a real problem is that their access
Carol, I don't
historically,
hear you.
that
Mother's here, Carol,
can people hear me?
is my audio again.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the part of the problem was that their access
Let me
was
try
from Ashford
this
side.
again.
No, well, Kathy knows all this.
Okay.
But the access was really from the Ashford side, and Ashford discontinued that road, and the power company also took out service. So, you know, it's a very difficult situation for her, but I think, I don't think that it's at all feasible. And I don't know whether the town ever, the town might wish to discontinue that as a road, an official road, because there are sections of it that are really impassable, and it would be a real problem for the town to make it passable from that direction. And we're talking about a big difference in distance. It's, you know, it's a few hundred, how far in, it's just a few hundred feet from coming in from the Ashford side. And there are other houses in that area, but they basically block that off. And coming in from the Wellington side is a very extensive roadway, and all of that is basically just, you know, it's really not passable.
Oh, yep.
And it's, yeah, and I think I feel for her because it's a difficult situation, but I'm not sure that we wouldn't be just creating more headaches for the town by trying to acquire the property.
I
Well,
just,
Go ahead, Bob.
I think the price that she's asking is too high. I think she was asking 74 or 75,000. You know,
Did
if the
that
town,
figure change in her last conversation with
no, I don't
anybody?
believe so.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think if the town could acquire that for maybe 45, that
Mm.
would probably be a reasonable amount. Get the road crew in there and knock the building down, or the fire department could burn it down, just to alleviate that potential headache. It might
Well,
be worth, but not for the price that she's asking.
Well, maybe that'll change when she sees
Oh,
how
maybe.
difficult it is
Yeah,
to sell.
I
right?
mean, it certainly would fill that little niche in at the
Yeah.
top there, up to the, you know, Ashford line. But for the price right now, no.
Well, we certainly, I mean, if it was something that the commission thought would be worthy of adding on, we certainly could discuss offering her some, you know, particular price and see if she would be willing to consider that. I guess we'd have to decide, number one, do we feel that it's important enough to try to add that on for a variety of reasons? Like you said, it kind of tucks that whole corner of Ashford up.
Yeah.
Nice. You still can walk up there. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
the old road is kind of a nice walking path to get up to that area. It's very quiet up there. The wetland and also the pond that's there is actually very nice habitat as well. You know, it's very quiet up there for wildlife. So
I agree, because I've been up there.
Yeah.
It's a nice,
So-
nice area, but
Yeah.
there's a fair amount of stuff that would have to be removed. There's, you know, junk, various kinds up there, and there also is the dam that creates the pond, and you know, earthen dams can be an issue as well. But it's you know, I'm more concerned about what the responsibilities of the town would be for maintaining a road, and whether there would be demands for access from the Wellington side. And I think that's a major concern, and I'm not sure that that's something that's really comes under our purview, because it's more of an issue for the selectmen and what the overall responsibilities of the town might be.
well, I think that's what they need to look at. If she sold the property and somebody wanted to put a house there, let's just say that they
Right.
wanted to do that. Would the town then become somehow legally responsible to open up the road, to maintain the road? And that might be one consideration of maybe trying to buy the property, so that never becomes an issue for the town. Also, just, I don't know if Ashford officially closed that road or abandoned the road.
Don't know, but I don't know about, you know, I think some of the Wellingtons records on roads and maintenance of roads and abandonment of roads, how accurate and thorough that that record is.
Yeah, Mark Palmer had gone through the records in the 90s or late 80s and researched all the roads that had or hadn't been abandoned, just to make sure that a developer wouldn't buy a chunk of land and the town would be responsible for widening the road for them. That happened in Tolland. Tolland ended up building, I don't know, about a mile of brand new road because they never abandoned one of their old roadways.
Yeah,
And
and
Mark Palmer had gone through and done a pretty thorough job. I don't know where that study is. He prepared it for the selectmen. If it's in the vault someplace, I don't know.
there was a study done even farther back than that, back in the 70s, probably 70s or early 80s. I think probably the 70s. There was a CETA employee who did research. It was one of the MACOs who was hired under CETA program, federal employment program, and he did an indexing of the roads. And I don't know whatever happened with that report also, but there is a report that goes back farther than that, reviewing the status of all of the roads. But I think that's a serious something that the town really needs to look at is to resolve that, but that's not really on us, but it may impact what needs to be done.
Right. No, it doesn't, that's not our issue, but I guess the question is, would we want to consider recommending that the town purchase that property to add on to Fenton Ruby Park? If the price was reasonable.
If the price was reasonable.
Mhm.
Mixed feelings.
Again, I think one of our other concerns, as we've talked about, was just, being able to not worry about having, traffic, ATVs, anything on that part of the park. And also having access, keeping maybe from the Lustig side, maybe we need to consider whether or not we want to keep some type of access available on that road. So if we ever wanted to do, for example, a timber harvest up in that portion of the property, we would have some kind of access as well. Or even
It might be worth checking with Ashford to see what exactly the status of that is. And whether, because that would be important, because that's where the real access point is to anything that involves vehicular stuff.
right.
Or
Right.
Basically, you're looking at it as a buffer zone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's also some goodwill for this woman who needs to clean up her estate, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right. She said she can't donate the property. She's not in a financial position.
Right. That's understandable.
Yeah. It's a very tragic situation, but that's not, I feel for her, but she is not in a position to donate. No.
Well, I'll continue to have, try to talk to the, First Selectman and see if we can look, encourage them to look further into the road status and to let them know that, this commission might consider recommending purchase of the property if it was a reasonable price to add on to the park.
And that there are some other issues that might be clarified with regard to access
And the dam.
and the dam.
Right.
And
having
the dam.
engineer look at the dam. I mean, I've been up there several times. That earthen dam is quite wide.
It is.
Mhm.
I would have thought that with all of the huge rainstorms we've had to date, if there was going to be a problem, we'd have seen it by now. So, but anyway, certainly would need some expertise to look at it as well. Okay. we'll keep our eyes and ears open if you hear of anybody, especially with properties that border some of our other larger pieces in town that may come up for sale, or or whether or not we want to start approaching other property owners, who are abutting the park and so on. We can certainly look into those things as well. Cato Rock property. So for those of you, just a reminder, Cato Rock property is, if you remember the old Christmas shop on Route 44, that was in Ashford.
Been around long enough to have eaten lunch at the Christmas. There was the restaurant that used to be there. What was it called? The Wagon Wheel or something?
The wagon shed.
Wagon Shed, right. Yeah, it was wagon something. Yeah.
That parcel consists of 12 different properties. 10 of them are in Ashford, 2 are in Wellington. It's a total of 300 and I think about almost 360 acres, and about 310 are in Ashford, and the other 40, it might be 350 total. About 40 of it is in Wellington and 310 is in Ashford. And as you know, that it was a brownfield. There was contamination on several parts of the property, and most of that has been cleaned up. The town of Ashford and the town of Wellington have been working together through the years to get that rectified. There's still a little bit of mitigation that needs to be done, and the town of Ashford and Wellington are again working together to get a grant to finish up the mitigation on the property. They held a joint public hearing about a month ago, inviting anyone to talk about some ideas of how that property can be used, because both towns did acquire that property legally because the taxes were never paid on it. So now the towns of Ashford and Wellington own their respective parcels, but they're working together to get the rest of the brownfield areas mitigated. And then they want to consider how they would use those properties. So they had a joint public hearing to talk about it. And there were lots of ideas. The Ashford Conservation Commission proposed that most of that property be used as passive recreational space, community gardens, walking trails. And I had, put in a note in a letter to Erica because I wasn't able to go to that meeting. Basically that there's the northern area of the Wellington property is where the Blue Trail crosses through, that goes into Ashford, and that we would, certainly want to, yep, thank you. We would want to support the continuation of that area as open space so that trail corridor could be maintained. And there was a representative from Connecticut Forest and Parks Association that was also involved in that meeting. And they did let the powers who be know that they would like to see that be a permanent conservation easement along the trail. So there's a lot of different ideas. There are some people from the Ashford side that are looking maybe to develop some of it so they can use it for some economic relief. But these were just ideas that were generated because the towns are going for this other mitigation grant, and they had to list some of these ideas in the grant. So it's just stay tuned on that. Any questions? I mean, that's as much as I know. Anything under any other old business that people want to bring up? All right, under new business communications, there's none that I have. I checked the mail recently. I wanted to talk about our meeting schedule for 2023. How do people feel about continuing to meet on the third Wednesday of each month?
That works for me.
Okay.
Yeah, that could be a problem for me. Wednesdays are, depending on well, for some of the time, unless somebody's around to give me a ride.
Well, we certainly can, I mean, we're still meeting remotely. Do people want to continue to meet remotely, or do you want to meet in person?
Kathy, is there a termination date on that? I lost track of what happened in terms of legislation that would allows the continuation of hybrid meetings.
I haven't heard, Carol. I certainly can check with the town clerk on that.
Yeah,
If we're-
because if we're meeting remotely, it's not an issue. But it can be an issue during academic year. My husband wants to go play his clarinet in Willimantic on Wednesday nights, so.
Mhm. Well, I'm sure one of us can, give you a ride, Carol, if that was so. But okay, so if nobody has any issues with us, at least for the moment, maintaining our schedule on the third Wednesday of the month at 7 and continuing remotely, I'll just put that in because we have to get that information into the town. We'll vote on it officially at our next meeting for our schedule. I'll put all the dates for next year in,
Okay.
and we'll vote on it next time.
Mhm.
Okay, and other new business, one other thing I wanted to bring up, Nora, I don't want to put you on the spot, but your term as an alternate will be expiring on 12/1/2022.
That's
As
like
an al-
next week. Isn't that next week?
Yeah, coming up in a couple of minutes.
So I wanted to check with you. First of all, do you want to continue with the commission? And if you do, the other thing you might want to consider, since Peter is no longer a regular member, we do have a vacancy as a regular member. We can always bump you up as a regular member. So
You're
And
putting
his-
me on the spot.
I know. You
if
can think about it and get back to me.
I definitely would continue as an alternate. It like today I had a staff meeting till 5 and then I almost forgot about this meeting. So, I mean, sometimes it gets tricky with school. But I would definitely consider continuing to be an alternate. And then if you are really stuck, and you need that one person, I would do
You'll-
that.
We can put you in as a regular, you mean? We can seat you as a regular? Is that what you mean?
Sure.
Okay. So
But
you'd like to,
I'm not back in my house yet, but, so,
okay, so we
Sure.
can, I have to send a letter to the Board of Selectmen, letting them know that we need to re-up people's terms. And
but if there's somebody that has more availability, please. I don't know if, Mark down there maybe wants to join at the bottom there.
Put Mark on the spot.
Mark, are you there?
He's gonna disappear on us.
Right.
No, he's there. He's there.
Okay.
I'm here. I haven't considered that. I'm considering, I want to be a friend of Ruby Fenton and maybe see a few more of these meetings, but these meetings are really beyond what I'm accustomed to. Yeah, so I'll just say, let me look at a few more meetings and make a decision later on if I'd want to be an alternate, not a regular. Put you back on the spot.
And
yeah,
then-
we do have 2 alternate spots open too. Thank you.
Yeah, and is Patty due to expire too?
Patty, where are you?
She's gone, but according to my list, Patty's term was up and Peter's term was
she's back.
expiring, so
Right.
she,
Patty,
so-
do you want to continue on the commission? Because I send, I send the
Yes,
recommendation
Yeah.
to the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah.
Yep, okay,
I'm
great.
putting my dishes away. I'm listening. Yep, definitely continue. Yep.
Okay, all right.
All right, so, yeah. Shoot me an email, Kathy. When, you have to know by next week, right? Or 2 weeks?
Well, are you at least would continue as an alternate, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, correct. Yes, and I can put that in just that way, as asked that you continue as an alternate, that they, they will vote to approve that.
Okay.
And then that would leave one regular member term vacant. And that would be the one that because Peter's term expired December 1st of 22 also. So,
Right.
you know, we still could have 2 more alternates too.
Right,
Right.
right. So, and anybody, I mean, even sometime next year, anybody can opt to come in as an alternate and or be bumped up to a regular member. So, you know, you don't have to make any kind of final decision, Laura, at this point. I don't want to put any pressure on you, I know.
Okay.
You know, so. I'm just trying to remember, do you think that we should vote on this in terms of asking the Board of Selectmen to approve new terms for Nora and for Patty? Do we normally take a vote on this? I think we do, don't we?
I think so.
Okay, somebody want to make a motion?
Yeah, I move that we recommend to the selectmen reappointment of Patty Phillips as a regular member and Nora Jones as an alternate member of the commission.
I'll second.
Any more discussion? Seeing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstained? So moved. Thank you. Okay. Now we come to our favorite part of the meeting.
Motion to adjourn, you mean?
Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Our next.
So move.
Carol, second on that? I'm sorry, did somebody, who made the motion to adjourn?
Carol.
Carol? Okay, any second?
Second,
Second.
Okay. Thanks, I'm gonna put Nora in. Okay.
Yes. I didn't know, if I can do that, right? I can second?
Because you're seated.
Okay, okay. See, I don't even know the rules. I don't think you want me on the commission.
Oh, it's a learning process. We're always asking questions of each other, like, how did we usually do this? So, all right, all in favor, say aye.
I.
Aye.
All right, I'm gonna shut
Bye.
off.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Everyone.
Thanks for all the good information and your hard work.
Yeah.